15-minute video by our scheduled keynote, which was set to be from Janea Scott, who is the Senior Counselor to the Assistant Secretary of Land and Minerals Management in the U.S. Department of the Interior. She pre-recorded this video for us, and it is a top high-level summary of what she would have said in person. She incredibly did this in the middle of the night while she was sick. So we're eternally grateful for her sending this video in and for giving us an overview of the work that the Department of Interior has been doing to move forward the siting and transmission.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to be there with you today. I'm Janea Scott, and I serve as the Senior Counselor to the Assistant Secretary for Land and Mineral Management. Among other bureaus, Land and Minerals includes the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and the Bureau of Land Management. My focus in my role as Senior Counselor is on clean, renewable energy and transmission. While I do some work with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, most of my time is spent working with the Bureau of Land Management on solar, wind, geothermal, and transmission projects. I'm honored to be included with the set of august thought leaders sharing ideas today. And again, I'm really sorry that I wasn't able to join in person. Today, I'd like to talk with you about a few items. First, because it's exciting and essentially hot off the press, I want to amplify some of the renewable energy announcements Secretary Haaland made just last week. As you have likely heard Secretary Haaland say, the time to act on climate is now. Climate change poses an existential threat, not just to our environment, but to our health, our communities, and our economic well-being. Secretary Haaland also notes that as we look to stem the worsening impacts of the climate crisis, we know that clean energy, including transmission lines, solar energy, and storage projects on public lands, is helping communities across the country to be part of the climate solution while creating good-paying jobs. We're working hard on an all-hands-on-deck approach towards ambitious clean energy goals that will support families, boost local economies, lower consumer costs, and help address economic injustice. Just last week, Interior made 3 announcements related to renewable energy on our nation's public lands. First, Secretary Haaland announced that the Interior Department has now permitted more than 25 gigawatts of clean renewable energy projects. 25 gigawatts. This includes dozens of solar, wind, and geothermal projects, as well as gin tie lines on public lands that are essential for connecting clean energy projects on federal and non-federal lands to the grid. These permitted projects have enough capacity to power more than 12 million homes across the country with clean, renewable energy. It's 25 gigawatts of clean energy and more than 12 million homes. Second of 3, we also announced the final renewable energy rule. This rule will lower consumer energy costs as well as the cost of developing solar and wind projects, improve renewable energy project application processes, and incentivize developers to continue to responsibly develop projects on public lands. Let me give you a little bit more detail about each of these key components. The Energy Act of 2020 authorized the BLM to reduce acreage rents and capacity fees to promote wind and solar development. The BLM initially reduced these fees through guidance in 2022. The final renewable energy rule codifies reductions by 80%, improving financial predictability for developers pursuing long-term projects on public land. The rule will also facilitate development in identified priority areas for wind and solar development, while maintaining appropriate flexibility to ensure a fair return for the use of public lands. The rule expands the BLM's ability to accept leasing applications in these priority areas without first going through a full auction, but it also retains the BLM's ability to hold competitive auctions where appropriate. The final rule also continues our commitment to creating American manufacturing jobs while helping to build a clean energy economy, including by providing financial incentives for developers to use project labor agreements and domestic materials. And the third of 3 renewable energy announcements we made last week is that the Erica and Victory Pass solar projects in California are now fully operational, adding 465 megawatts of clean electricity to the grid and 400 megawatts of battery storage. With completion of these 2 solar projects, Victory Pass and Erica, The BLM has also surpassed 10 gigawatts of clean power currently being generated on public lands. These operational wind and solar and geothermal projects are now powering more than 5 million homes across the West. I think last week's announcements alone demonstrate the momentum behind clean and renewable energy and transmission. This momentum is rooted in partnerships and collaboration with folks like all of you that are in the room there today. It builds upon the hard work and expertise of our dedicated team at the Bureau of Land Management and across federal, state, and local resource agencies. The momentum here is undeniable. And I have to tell you about more than just what we did last week. Let's talk for a minute about what we did yesterday. On Monday, Interior announced some sensible additions to our geothermal program, adopting 2 existing categorical exclusions that will enable the BLM to expedite the review and approval of geothermal exploration proposals. The Bureau of Land Management adopted these 2 existing categorical exclusions from the United States Forest Service and from the Department of the Navy. The categorical exclusions adopted yesterday apply only to geothermal exploration operations on public land. So when I'm talking about exploration, what I mean is that potential developers are looking to see whether there is enough heat to build a geothermal plant. If the conditions are favorable, then a potential developer would initiate additional permitting with the BLM to build a geothermal power plant and generate electricity. This subsequent development of a geothermal resource would require additional National Environmental Policy Act analysis. As the Bureau of Land Management Director Tracy Stone Manning said, geothermal energy is one of the technologies that can move our country toward a clean energy future. It only makes sense to use the same streamlined process for permitting geothermal exploration that other government agencies have proven can work. And yesterday, BLM also announced that the Sunlight Storage 2 battery energy storage system is now fully operational. The battery energy storage system is part of the Desert Sunlight Solar Farm in eastern Riverside County, California. These projects add up to 300 megawatts of electricity to power the grid for a total of 530 megawatts of energy storage capacity. So the project adds up to 300 megawatts of electricity to the state power grid for a total of 530 megawatts of energy storage capacity. That increases the reliability and availability of clean energy. This newest project component allows solar to be stored and then released when the power is needed most. On any given week, BLM could likely pull together announcements of key milestones like the ones I've just highlighted for you. Work continues apace, environmental reviews are being carried out, tribal consultations are taking place, public meetings are being hosted, listening sessions are underway. And if these examples haven't convinced you that a clean energy transition is truly underway, let me emphasize what BLM has pending in terms of environmental reviews for renewable energy applications and applications pending review. The numbers I mentioned next represent a snapshot in time. As those of you who are familiar with this work will know, it takes more to bring a renewable energy project online than a BLM permit. Other agencies often have permitting roles like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and their state counterparts. Project developers need to secure power purchase agreements, positions in the transmission interconnection queues, and project financing. However, with that caveat in place, as of this month, April, the BLM is processing permits for 66 utility-scale clean energy projects proposed on public lands in the western United States. These 66 projects have the combined potential to create thousands of good-paying jobs and add more than 32 additional gigawatts of renewable energy to the Western electric grid and power millions of more homes. The BLM is also undertaking preliminary review of about 200 applications for solar and wind development, as well as more than 100 applications for solar and wind energy area testing. There is great interest in developing renewable energy projects on public lands, and I think all of the work pending before BLM helps to demonstrate that. Over the last 3 years, as I have noted, we have been diligent in partnering and collaborating with all interested and engaged stakeholders, and we have been extremely thoughtful on how best to reform and update our rules, regulations, and frameworks for onshore renewable energy development. Our public lands are playing a critical role in the clean energy transition. We're mindful of the competing demands on our nation's public lands. We are working hard to balance our country's equally important goals of facilitating renewable energy while ensuring that lands are set aside for conservation, recreation, and other purposes. To do this, we are working diligently to complete landscape-level planning efforts to assess land health, to protect iconic Western species like the sage-grouse, and to direct development to appropriate places. I'd like to spend a moment providing some additional detail on one of these landscape-level planning efforts, which is the updated Solar Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, or what we call the updated Western Solar Plan. We're updating this plan to include more states and streamline BLM's framework for siting solar energy projects across the West in order to support clean energy goals, long-term energy security, climate resilience, and improved conservation outcomes. The Western Solar Plan proposal is an update of BLM's 2012 Western Solar Plan, and it had identified some areas across 6 states with high solar potential and low resource conflicts in order to guide responsible solar development and provide certainty to developers. Following months of stakeholder engagements, including 15 public scoping meetings, the updated roadmap refines the analysis in the original 6 states and expands it to include Idaho, Montana, Oregon, Washington, and Wyoming. In considering updates to the Western Solar Plan, the BLM worked closely with the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab to examine forecasts for national clean energy needs and determine that approximately 700,000 acres of public lands would be needed to meet these goals. The draft Western Solar Plan evaluates 6 alternatives, each proposing to make different amounts of public land available to solar development applications under different criteria, such as proximity to transmission infrastructure, designated critical habitat, or other important ecological and cultural resources. The BLM's preferred alternative would provide approximately 22 million acres of land open for solar application, giving maximum flexibility to reach the nation's clean energy goals. And just for perspective, BLM manages about 245 million acres of public lands. That's 1 in 10 acres. That's 1 in every 10 acres in the country. So BLM manages about 245 million acres of public land. By directing development to areas that have fewer sensitive resources, less conflict with other uses of public lands, and are in close proximity to transmission lines, the BLM can permit clean energy more efficiently while maintaining robust public and tribal engagement. And those are always essential features of all BLM reviews of individual projects. I've been asked many times over the last few months, why is BLM updating the Western Solar Plan? We're updating the Western Solar Plan because clean energy goals, climate goals, renewable energy portfolio standards have all been changed and modernized in the intervening years between the 2012 plan and today. We need a Western Solar Plan that reflects today's goals. For example, a carbon pollution-free power sector by 2035, and also one that has flexibility for the future. We're updating the Western Solar Plan because more than a decade has passed since the initial plan, and in this time, solar technology has changed. There are places where solar technology may go today that were not economic or technologically feasible a decade ago, but those places are now. We're updating the Western Solar Plan because BLM has learned a lot over the last 10 years, and we can improve the solar development application process by providing developers with better predictability while also maintaining sufficient flexibility to address site-specific resource considerations. We're updating the Western Solar Plan to include design features and best management practices that reflect today's best standards and provide flexibility to continue bringing in best practices as time progresses and we continue to learn more. The public comment period for the draft Western Solar Plan closes this Thursday, April 18th. And I hope that many of you here today will provide your thoughtful and constructive comments to the BLM. That input that we receive will help us inform the final programmatic environmental impact statement and record of decision. So I've talked to you about the renewable energy projects, and I've talked to you about some of the program level actions we're taking to facilitate this transition to a clean energy economy. I wanted to take a moment also to mention the people. We cannot do this without the thoughtful, dedicated experts at the Bureau of Land Management and all throughout Interior who work day in and day out, engaging with communities, consulting with tribes, assessing the project locations, lending their expertise to broader policy matters, and honestly, just being the caring and consummate professionals that they are. BLM is a great place to work, and it is seeking more talented individuals to work on these renewable energy programs and projects. I know that there's students here looking for opportunities to work on something meaningful like this clean energy transition that we're speaking about today. And there's professors who are designing the classes for those students and those jobs of the future. You can be an archaeologist, a biologist, a communications person, or a community relations person. You can be a project manager, an expert in one of the technologies, an attorney, or a policy guru, among other expertises. There'll be a meaningful role for you at BLM. So I'm going to put in a shameless plug and ask that you consider coming to work for the BLM. We have offices all throughout the West in major cities and small towns. And if you want to move out east, you'll have opportunities to go to Washington, D.C. and work at the headquarters. Tell your friends and family about these opportunities to be part of this team. You could be part of the team that helps deliver some of the achievements that I mentioned today. It's a really great place to be. Well, thank you for indulging my shameless plug. Let me conclude by summarizing some of the takeaways and themes from my chat with you. I appreciate this chance to be among the thought leaders in this area who are thinking every day about the emerging energy transition, risks and opportunities for Western public lands. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I think we're past the emerging stage of this clean energy transition. I highlighted multiple announcements made over the last few days, including completing the permitting for more than 25 gigawatts of renewable energy projects before 2025. And I mentioned a battery energy storage project that began operation yesterday to show that work is moving thoughtfully and at a steady to accelerated pace. I provided detail on the renewable energy rule and the updated planning for the solar programmatic environmental impact statement, otherwise known as our Western Solar Plan. The renewable energy rule improves BLM permitting processes for solar and wind projects and provides financial incentives for development. It's the how. How do we do this? The updated Western Solar Plan helps identify the most appropriate areas for solar development across the West and will provide more predictability without jeopardizing important environmental or cultural resources or other uses of public lands. It's the where. Updated Western Solar Plan helps us identify where we would develop solar. These types of thoughtful landscape level planning, along with the rules for development, provide invaluable tools for the BLM to manage the risks and opportunities of this clean energy transition on Western lands. I discussed the people needed to make this good work happen, and it truly is good work, and they really are fantastic people. We know and understand that there are no empty spaces. We know and understand that some uses demand more from our public lands than others. We know and understand that we are not the first people to value and cherish these lands, and that tribal nations must be heard and respected. We know and understand the importance of balancing development and conservation and recreation and protecting our nation's public lands. Taken together, all of these updates are coming at a critical time because the demand for clean energy has never been greater. The technological advances, increased interest, cost effectiveness, and tremendous potential make these projects a promising path for diversifying our energy portfolio, while at the same time combating climate change and investing in communities. Our public lands are playing a critical role in this clean energy transition. And I can't say enough how much we appreciate and value the thoughtful public input, the collaboration, and the partnerships. It's going to take all of us working together to identify and minimize risks and to maximize the benefits that will come from this transition. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak. I'm so sorry that I couldn't be there with you all in person, but I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to share some thoughts here with you right now. Thank you again.
Thank you, Janea.